What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down why the market's looking very promising going into tomorrow and beyond. Break down what happened with Apple's earnings and more factors affecting the markets for tomorrow. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY on invested cash. The offer ends very soon at the end of March. Anyways, let's talk about what's happening with the markets. Looking at SPY, we're seeing a very interesting trend right here. We had this nice wick that formed since SPY got that bottom, and since then we've been making higher highs and higher lows over and over again. The bears are struggling to get SPY below our 20 and our 50 EMAs, and for the time being, the market is looking like it wants to bounce. We're also getting good guidance, at least from Aapl. The share price is still in the green. They got record earnings despite the fact that their Chinese sales slipped. So far, the market's looking very promising heading into tomorrow. So I'll break down more details about this. So what's happening so far for the markets? The answer is we just got Aapl and Intel's earnings, and both of them are in the green for now. What's good about Aapl is the fact that Apple is looking for very, very strong results. Tim Cook did tell us about how their sales just continue to improve. And overall, the future for 2025 is looking very promising for them. This helped the share price go up. So looking at some specific pieces of data, we had Tim Cook talk about how Apple had its best quarter ever with revenue at $124.3 billion, up 4% from a year ago. So compared to last year, that's actually a big improvement, despite the fact that it was a slight beat on expectations. On top of this, when you look at their overall sales, their iPhone sales were a little lackluster, only up they're actually down 0.8% to about $69.1 billion. This is because of the Chinese sales decreasing, but Mac and iPhone sales were quite good. Wearables, home, and accessories were also down just 1.7%, but other sales were quite good. So very mixed stuff overall. But if anything, I would say that the good does offset the bad. The iPhone sales were only down 0.8%. Now, there were some challenges on China. When you look at the greater Chinese revenue for the quarter, they were just down about 11% year over year. Over half of the decline of what they expected was driven by the change in the inventories that were going on, which happened at the beginning to the end of the quarter. And that's a big shift that happened. Despite this, Apple did mention that there were some external hardships that did slow down these sales, but they're going to be fine at least as time goes on. Looking at their overall numbers, EPS was up 10% year over year, which got investors very excited, and revenue is still up over 4%, which is not bad whatsoever. Yes, the Chinese revenue is down just a little bit, but despite that, most of their other key metrics were quite good, especially with their margins. So that was very impressive for a lot of investors. People had low expectations. That's what's helping the share price go up. Most people were thinking that Apple was going to miss because of what's happening in China. Most people thought their margins would be trash. Instead, it's the opposite. They're doing quite well. So good job by Apple overall. They're also talking about how they had strong margins, at least as time goes on. And then we're going to be looking for some strong results for the next quarter, which is not bad. There's also some news that they are going to be spending $23.6 billion on share buybacks during the Q1 2025 period. That's good news as well for investors. So this is what really helped the share price. So overall, despite the fact that the iPhone sales slipped and the Chinese revenue is not the strongest, we saw good growth in their earnings. We saw good margins, and the numbers are still looking quite promising, especially as time goes on. So this is what helped investors buy up the share price. On top of this, we also had Intel. Intel did not have the strongest of guidances, but it beat on the fourth quarter earnings and the share price is still in the green. So what's happening is EPS was a beat at about 13 cents adjusted. Revenues at 14.26 billion, all above expectations, but their guidance was not the strongest overall. We ended up seeing that there was a slight decrease in what we're expecting for their revenue. Despite that coming out, okay, I just want to say that they're still going to be completely fine because of the current sales, and we're going to be looking for some new products coming out, especially with bigger investments to be made in their data center and artificial intelligence segments. So that is what is helping the share price. Despite the fact that guidance wasn't as strong, investors were still happy about what happened with their earnings, and we're still doing quite well on that end. Now, just three more things, then I'll talk about the charts. Just know that tomorrow is going to be Friday, January 31st, the last day of January 2025. Please note that 1 hour before the stock market opens, we have our PCE data report coming out, and we also have employment numbers. The main thing is going to be PCE with Bowman giving a speech. The PCE price index for all items month over month is expected to be 0.3%. Hopefully, it's close to or below that. The price index year over year for all items is expected to be 2.6%. We have core PCE year over year at 2.8% expected. And then that's what we're going to be looking out for. I hope we get some good numbers with core month over month being at 0.2%. When the CPI came out, all the numbers were aligned with expectations. So I think this should be okay. And if anything, I think that could be decent for the markets because you have to consider that we have a crazy options chain for tomorrow. Tomorrow we have over 550,000 calls expiring, and we have over 2 million of these puts expiring. So we have a 3.62 puts to call ratio. There's 3 puts for every call, which makes me suspect the market makers may try something such as trying to push the market. So they may try to pump stocks. Right down the market's neutral. It's in the middle. Momentum is at fear right now, so we'll have to see how that shifts. It may get back to neutral. The put to call option ratio ended up dipping quite a bit as we started to see a lot of these puts being closed, causing a short squeeze in the markets. And the VIX is neutral. We're watching to see if this ends up dipping to fill its gap. So that being said, what does all of this mean for the market for tomorrow? The answer is so far, earnings have been decent. Okay, our data has been fine, and the market is still holding up quite nicely. This makes me think that there's a good chance the market's going to attempt to continue the trend that we are on. Looking at SPY to start things off, okay, we're making higher lows. We had a low here, came up, had a low here, came up, low here, came up. And we're trying to fill this gap up to about that 607.5 area. The most likely possibility is because there's so many shorts expiring, SPY is going to do something like this where it shuffles, and starts pushing to fill this gap to the 608 area. We'll see if we try to break past that or not. If we do, we could be trying to visit all-time highs to get very close to this. We'll see if we break all-time highs to push for like the 615s or if we get a rejection off of that. So I'll be watching that very closely heading into February. Do we get a rejection off all-time highs or do we just shoot past them to go up to 615 plus? I'll be watching that very, very closely just to see what this ends up doing. But for now, I do anticipate we're pushing for very close to all-time highs. The market's technically on an uptrend. There could be some shuffling that happens, but I think there is potential for us to go higher because we got Aapl in the green right now, and we're seeing a lot of optimism as the bears are struggling to break SPY down and the buyers have a bigger edge. So look for some consolidation in the morning. As long as SPY does not lose 603 and 600, as long as we're above those two EMAs, that's our 50 and 20 EMA. I think we favor the upside for an attempt to fill the gap to get close to 608 and eventually the 610 area at all-time highs. And we could even try to surpass that. So we'll see about that. On the NASDAQ or the QQQ, we're looking pretty promising. We're above our key EMAs. Had we lost 521, I'd be concerned for us to start dipping to 518. We managed to get bought back up at the end of the day, and in the after hours, we're pushing thanks to Aapl. So what's very likely is we shuffle in tomorrow morning and we slowly try to push up for that 527 area. If we break the high of the day, I think we try to fill this gap slowly, try to fill this gap up towards 530. Then we'll see if you reject or not off that 530 area. But overall, there is potential for us to try to fill this gap. If not, continue to go even higher. So I do anticipate some more upside for the NASDAQ QQQ. For others out there, we have the IWM Russell 2000. What's interesting is the fact that although that this is like going to dip a little bit, might retest the 227s. What's good is we have a nice accumulation here. There's like a potential slanted inverse head and shoulders, and we're forming a nice accumulation to try to get back up to these higher levels. So I think what's going to happen is we dip to about the 227 area, and we'll see if we get a bounce off of this to try to continue this trend. This might lead to a small pullback here before it tries to push for a 230. There is potential for it to try to form like an inverse head and shoulders as well to start breaking out higher. So I'll be watching that very, very closely. What else could help this would be Aapl, Nvda, and Google. Google is showing a lot of life. I'll talk about that, not to mention Nvda and Aapl. So I'll talk more about this in just a couple of minutes. For just two of my futures, we have ES, which is looking decent. So what's interesting is we're very choppy. We entered like a very, very choppy phase. There's a lot of manipulation today with some selling that came out. But despite the selling, the buyers defended and they have a bigger edge. We actually are in the green right now, and we're continually making higher highs and higher lows. So we have a gap to fill, taking us back up towards the 6125 area. I think, I think what's going to likely happen is we dip like this, consolidate, then start pushing up to fill this gap up here around the 6125 zone or above. I think we re-enter the chop zone, which is where we like to see consolidation, and we could be getting very close to all-time highs. But I anticipate we're going to try to fill this gap and try to push higher. As long as we don't lose 60, 87, 60, 71, we favor upside for now. If we lose 60, 71, we could turn back down to 60, 30. But this, like I said before, is favoring the 6125 plus area and even more upside. For NQ, we look a bit more bullish. We're making higher highs and higher lows. If we end up losing 21,500, we could be dumping back down to about the lower 21,000s, but we're making higher lows right here. So we could be kind of like dipping like this and continuing to consolidate. I think there's a good chance we try to push to fill this gap up here around this 21,869 area or above. So I want to see if we get a rejection or not off of that, but I do anticipate some upside into the 21,800s as the most likely possibility. And he was showing a lot of life. And what's good about this is the fact that we're technically continuing to make higher lows. So look at the lows. There's just a wick, a wick, a wick. We're just continuing to get bought back up. And we could be forming a nice wedge like this, right? You could draw a wedge like this that's forming. So I'd love to see if this continues to pan out or not. But overall, this is looking pretty good and promising to try to fill this gap up above. Unless we lose 21,500, I favor the upside. I think we're going to likely be trying to push for 21,800. For Bitcoin, okay, Bitcoin is looking like it's in a range. All right, there's tough resistance around 106,680. What could be happening is that we might be coming back down like this to retest our 20 EMA. Then we could try to bounce back up towards that resistance as we're still looking bullish and we're technically on an uptrend. So I'm watching to see if this trend line rises up like this and we try to continue to hold this. So overall, I would say that Bitcoin is looking more bullish. Might be a small dip to the trend line though, so look for a little pullback tomorrow to about 104,000 flat. And then we'll see if we bounce or not off of that. Heading into individual tickers, we have Nvda, which is looking pretty nice. What's good about Nvda is this. We're holding support. We had support right here around the 117 to 120 area. We held this, we bounced. We touched this, we bounced. We're holding up quite well. If we lose 117, then we could be dipping to 115. We did touch that, but then we bounced, so it's a good sign so far. We're forming like a double bottom. I'm hoping that we come down like this, come back up, form like a double bottom, and this is like Nvda getting ready for a bounce. If we do break out of this and we get back above our 20 EMA at 127, I think we easily go up to about 133-ish, 132 to 133-ish. I think there's a very, very good chance we try to push higher for that, but we need to see this thing break past 127, and we need to see it break out of this resistance and form a nice double bottom. We're holding support right now, and I think there's a very, very good chance we try to go higher. So watch and see if that ends up being the case or not. For Tsla, okay, what's very interesting about Tsla is the fact that we have this yellow trend line of resistance. We touched this, rejected, touched it, rejected, touched it, rejected many, many times. And what's very interesting is the fact that Tesla's at the resistance right now. So if we break, and it's actually very simple to understand, let me explain this. What's going to happen to Tesla is this. We love to pump in the mornings. So if we could pump, and if we can't break the yellow trend line, today we tried, we were not able to do it, but at the end of the day, we did see Tesla get bought back up. If we break that and reject, if we hit the yellow trend line and reject near 405, we could be returning back down to 390, okay? Our critical support is at 385. We actually held that today, so that's a good sign at the 200 EMA. And then the bullish case is, what if you actually break past this trend line like this, and then we back test it and start pushing for this resistance? I'm watching 414, then eventually, the 420 areas are targets for a breakout like this. I think there's a very good chance that Tesla tries to go for it. I lean a little bit more in favor of this trying to break out like this, but we'll see just to be safe. I'm hoping Tesla gets a break above this trend line finally. It's been a long time since we did that. And if we do that, I think we're going all the way up to about the 420s. So we'll see. Can Tesla get bought back up and try to recover? Let's hope for the best and give this the time it needs. Apple's looking promising. We're currently up almost 3% right now. What I like about Aapl is, at least technically speaking, earnings were not a disaster. Earnings were actually decent. And then what's good is there's an inverse head and shoulders like structure I've been talking about. And notice that we're continuing to push. We're still trying to push like this. So there's this upwards momentum that can try to push this higher, closer to 250. There is potential in Aapl. If we lose 233, we could be dumping back down. And as long as we're above support around the 240 area, we're looking for an attempt to push for 250 or above. So I think there's a very, very good chance we try to pump higher with the inverse head and shoulders. So we'll see how things end up going. With that being said, I think there's a lot more upside potential in Aapl. We'll see how things end up going, at least moving forward. For Netflix, we're in the middle right now. So we have support at 968. If we lose this, we dip back down to essentially the 950 area. And then if we break past 990, we're going to be pushing higher. The problem with Netflix is the fact that there's a resistance near 990 to 1000 that's really tough to break. And then we are at support. We're trying to hold our 20 EMA. It is not looking that great. It might dip towards like 968 or a little bit below that before it tries to bounce. But I'm seeing that it's getting very tight. It's consolidating for some time before it tries to pick a direction. So we're going to be watching to see which way this breaks. But I am anticipating that it's going to likely trade in a channel like this just for some time. We're seeing a move like this that's being made. I anticipate what's going to happen is we dip towards this trend line, maybe dip below this and then try to bounce and just continue to consolidate as the most likely possibility. For MSTR, we're barely holding our trend line, so it's not that great. It's just very flat right now. We'll see if this trend line holds or not, but we have like a left shoulder, a head and then a right shoulder forming an inverse head and shoulders. So as long as this trend line holds, we could slowly uptrend for 347 and 352 as our targets. I think we may just slowly uptrend like this and push into the 350s. So watch to see if that ends up being the case or not. For Celsius, we have a nice setup. We dipped and we're trying to form a base at this 24 area. We were talking about that yesterday. We're going to be testing 26.08 as resistance. If this breaks, I'm looking for an attempt to get back up towards 26.5. If we lose 25.5, we could be dumping back down lower. I'm favoring 26.08 than 26.5 as our targets for a little bit more upside. So watch and see if that ends up being the case. We have a nice double bottom here and we're forming kind of like a W-shaped recovery move, which could be pushing us for 26.5 as our potential target. For Supermicro, we're looking decent. What's good about this is I was talking about how there's like a falling wedge-like pattern. We're trying to break out of here, so this could be looking for an attempt to push up for 29.4. If we break past that, we're looking for an attempt to push up towards the 30, so just keep that in mind. There's a good chance we're trying to go a little bit higher from here. So I think that we have this falling wedge-like pattern that's been developing, and this could push us up for 29.5 or above for higher levels. So I think there's a good chance we try to push higher for that. I would love to see us break past 29.4. If that's the case, I'm looking for 30.7 as our target. There's potential for a breakout here, so it is looking like it's a little bit more bullish. As I said yesterday, Palantir is looking bullish with the inverse head and shoulders. This is looking like it wants to go back up to these highs towards 83.5 or above. So it looks bullish to me. As long as we don't lose 78.6 and 76 flats, I'm favoring a push above 80, going all the way up towards 83. So overall, Palantir is looking amazing. Rivian looking so-so. What's interesting is we had this giant wedge that was forming. I want to see if we could try to break past 12.68. If this breaks, we're looking for an attempt to get back up towards 13.07. So there's most definitely potential in this. As long as we try to hold above this, we could start pushing a little higher here. So there's some potential right there. So far it's looking decent as long as we're above 16.4. I think there's a good chance it tries to go higher. There's this giant imbalance to fill. It got this dump after earnings. I hope that slowly recovers. What is good about this setup is the fact that we're forming a wedge. So as long as we hold this wedge, I think we're going to continue to push. So we'll see about this. We're forming a nice 4-hour base here. This could be favoring an attempt to get back above 17. I'm going to be watching this 17.25 area as a potential target because we have previous support becoming resistance up there. So I'll be watching that very, very closely just to see if we could end up visiting this area. So watch that just to be safe, but I think this is favoring upside a bit more. Now, AMD, I'm liking it so far. We're holding up very, very nicely above our EMA, the 20 EMA right here. The question is, can we get back above 19.5 to 119.5 to 120, excuse me. If we break 120, I think this thing is going to be going for 122, then the gap fill for 123. There's a good chance it tries to do that. Now, if we lose 118, we're looking for a dip back down towards 115, especially as we have this gap down here. But I'm hoping that we could try to break 119.5. If we break that tomorrow, yes, we're looking a little bit more bullish to fill this gap. So it has potential, and it's following Nvda, so that's a good sign so far. So a lot of semiconductors are trying to recover. ARM, for example, is following the trend, right? You guys can see that this is forming a nice accumulation right here. We have this gap to fill above. So I think that, excuse me, guys. I think that as long as we're above 151, if we were to lose 151, we're going to be dipping back down towards like 147 or below. But as long as we're above 151, we could continue to slowly inch our way up like this into the 160 area to fill this gap. There's a good chance that that's acting as a magnet, so I favor that a little bit more. As long as we don't lose 151, I favor that. For coin, coin is looking decent, but the only issue is that it's kind of following Bitcoin. So what might be happening is there might be a small dip coming here, a small one to retest where this wick happens to be. There's also this gap down here. So if this wick right here, this 296 support does not hold, we could be dipping to where this support is, where this 20 EMA is, which is aligning very nicely with our gap down here, and then it could try to bounce after that to try to continue to go higher. So I see a move either like down here where we dip and bounce, or we just dip a little bit lower and try to bounce as the most likely possibilities. So just keep that in mind. Amazon, so this already pumped so much. We have earnings coming up soon. We're making higher lows, which is a good sign, but we want to see if we could try to hold support. So unfortunately, what's not so good is the fact that we did not hold 135 or 235, excuse me. But if we lose 231, we're looking for a dip. My gut tells me it kind of dips here and tries to rebound like this. Might be an attempt to bounce that happens, but then even if we get that bounce, I think what's going to happen is we just consolidate between 235 and 240 for some time before it tries to break out higher. But I see that this might bounce a bit, but there's going to be some consolidation first before it tries to break out, so keep that in mind. Meta pumped really hard. Okay, it went up to about 700, then slowed down a little bit. It might slow down a little bit more, try to retest like 670. The 675-ish area, maybe that's where our 20 EMA is going to be tomorrow, and then we could bounce like that. If we lose 670, we're looking for a dip back down towards the 660 area. We might dip and then bounce, so give this the time it needs and be very, very patient nonetheless. For Microsoft, just know that we have a nice, this could develop into like a triple bottom. We'll see about that though. I'm hoping. So for now, I'm not really worried about what it's doing. This is all I care about. I want to see if this could base. Can we base right over here? Can we form a nice base around this 413 area? Can we form a base right here? If you form a base here, this will bounce back up into like the 425s. That could help the market to some extent. I think that the drop is a little bit exaggerated because earnings were quite good. They weren't too bad. Just one of the revenue segments was a little bit weak. Besides that, I think they did relatively well. So if you look at the range, okay, this also aligns with the theory of this potentially trying to bounce, because we love to bounce in the low 400s and we love to reject around 450. We're in a massive range right now. It's been like this for many, many months, almost a year actually. Microsoft has just been range bound. So I'm hoping we try to bounce here. There's a good support right here. The low 400s are very, very good. And this could try to rebound back up for 430. Hopefully that could help the market bounce. Google's looking promising. What's good about Google is very similar to Microsoft. For the last couple of months, it's been in a range, right? We've been stuck between resistance right here around this like 200 to 202 area. And we have support all the way down here around 190, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, it's trying to break here. If we continue to break past like this wick here, these highs, I think we could be looking for a breakout move all the way up to 205, then eventually the 210s for new highs. I see potential in Google. We'll see how our earnings treats this, but I think this is looking very promising so far. So it looks bullish. GameStop is looking like it might be testing 28.2, and if we break this, we go higher, so it looks pretty good. AMC is a little bit weak right now. We're looking to see if the space is at 3, might be dipping closer to the low 3s. DJT is dipping a little bit. It might retest 30 flat before it tries to bounce, so there could be a small dip here, but it has stronger support between 29 and 30, so watch to see if that ends up being the case. The VIX has a gap to fill down here around the 14.8 area, so it might bounce and start dipping lower, so give that some time to develop. The 10-year Treasury yield has a head and shoulders. This has been dipping ever since the Fed gave us more positive remarks. So that's a good sign, at least for our yields, at least thus far. And then we also have the dollar. Although this is at support trying to rebound a little bit, we'll see if the dollar does much. It may not affect the market as much. If the dollar is about to get a breakout, this could be a sign the market's going to top soon, but I don't think that this guarantees anything yet, because the market was also green while the dollar was green, which means just because the dollar pumps, it does not always mean the market is going to dump. So that tells me that we don't have to worry about this yet. For now, I think the market has more upside potential, especially because of Microsoft specifically. Microsoft could try to bounce, so could Google. Google looks very promising. Apple could help us, and so could Nvda, and that could really help the QQQ and NASDAQ. So we'll see how things end up going, but that's what my view of the market is right now, as the bulls have a bigger edge. So I hope we see the gap fill, and then we'll see how the market reacts after that. Until I see you guys again tomorrow morning before market open, I thank you all so much for listening. Do not forget about the PCE data report coming out for tomorrow. Until then, guys, I wish you all the best, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Have a good rest of your day, and peace out.